Hey, welcome back, everybody, to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts. I am the Caliban. And your other host is right here.
I'm Gooey. I'm ready to compete in gladiatorial combat.
Oh, is that what's going to happen here? Let me get my sulfur and my coal. We're a part of the Just Enough Trope podcast network, which is home to many shows about your favorite topics like TV shows, film, comic books, video games, and music. You can find out more by going to justenoughtrope.com or by following at JustEnoughTrope on Twitter. Keep the geek fires burning. Well, we are back for another episode. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm double fisting water and Baja Blast, trying to hydrate and wake up at the same time.
You're just cutting that Baja Blast just the right amount.
Yeah, exactly. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I love me a Baja Blast, and I don't know why. I know you can get it in bottles, like in 20 ounces, but if you want a big Baja Blast, the most Baja Blast, you can still only get it at Taco Bell, as far as I know.
I believe so, which I appreciate. I do have a can of it, and something feels wrong about drinking it outside of Taco Bell.
Yeah, it's only for special occasions. The bubbly seltzer water craze has basically infected all of America. And I found out the other day that like Coke doesn't really have their option for it. You know, there's La Croix. There's Bubbly, which is becoming popular, which I think is a Pepsi brand. But, like, there is no real Coke. Like, just recently, I guess, Coke executive realized, we got to get on this train.
Oh, they don't have...
The flavored water, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it's only a matter of time.
Before they own all of it, yeah.
Yeah. That's too bad for them.
Yeah, I feel really bad for the gigantic Coke Corporation. Before we get to today's topic on backtrekking, we should probably look at the news in the world of the Trek world. And there is some good news from the Trek world because Anthony Rapp announced on his social media recently that he just got engaged to his longtime boyfriend, Ken Ithfol, I think is how you say his name, or Ithfol.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations if you're ever listening to this.
Yeah, congratulations, Tony. And they've been together since 2013. I always wonder how, I guess when you're a public figure, like this information is just available, but it's a little weird that the article's like, they've been together since 2013. I'm like, how do you know? That's weird.
Yeah, that would be a little creepy to have to deal with, but what can you do, I guess?
Yeah, I guess so. And that's really good news. There's some bad news coming out of the Trek camp, as well, and that is that the animated Star Trek series has been available on Netflix for a long time, but it is leaving Netflix at the end of November, beginning of December. Yeah.
I just wanted to start getting
into that. Yeah, you just
too.
developed a hankering to get some more of that. The good news that kind of cuts that is that it's still available on CBS All Access, and I think you can get it on Prime if you're an Amazon Prime customer as well.
Why just that? Like all the other Star Treks are on Netflix.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that they're all dealt with or administrated differently. Like someday... Because now, everybody's got their own streaming platform. They're a front in this war. And so someday, say, DS9 will drop off. But it doesn't mean that Voyager or another show will. They'll all sort of pass out, at their own appointed times.
Maybe it's just going to stealth everything onto CBS All Access.
Yeah, eventually. And it seems like I'm sure they come up for renewal every once in a while. And maybe... the contract wasn't quite as long for the animated series because it's not, it's a little underappreciated.
Well, we got to get the word out there.
Yeah, we definitely do. And we just, of course, covered it recently on the show. But like I said, good news. It's still available if you want to check it out on Amazon Prime and also on CBS All Access. Are you getting that Disney love or Disney Plus love?
No, I don't think I can commit to another streaming service right now.
I know a lot of people are doing the free trial just to check out, like, say, The Mandalorian or whatever, and see if that's what they want to get into.
I've heard some people say some good things about that, so I want to check it out, but I need it to be a time when I know I have time to watch it. I don't want to waste that free trial, so I have to be strategic. with it a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I want to check out someday. Just the vast amount of content they have on there is incredible. As far as like old Disney cartoons, old movies, old like Disney produced TV shows. It's just like this huge treasure chest that you can just kind of sift through. There's something for everybody on it. But yeah, I'm in the same boat where it's like, I got a lot of Star Trek to watch still. So maybe when I find some free time, I can try to get into the Disney Plus.
Yeah, it finally broke me with that too, because I used to be like, okay, I'll watch, even casually, I was just like, I'll watch all the Marvel stuff that's coming out, but now it's like I'm just gonna wait or not see it. I don't know.
I don't know if this is just the bleak future that we have to look forward to, but when I see something I really love, it's kind of 50-50 for me if I'm ever going to see it again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whenever I watch something now, it either has to be something totally new because I haven't seen it, or something that I'm going to make content out of. And when I think about just watching, a movie that I really love that I've already seen 3 or 4 times, it's like, wow, am I ever going to watch that again in my life? Now that I've got Disney Plus and Apple Plus and this new Star Trek. And so, yeah, the old days of just watching my Empire Strikes Back VHS over and over again those days are gone.
I hate to admit that I've had those same thoughts at times too. So,
or even music, like I find myself pushing myself to listen to new music, stuff that I haven't run into, or just stuff that is outside of the circle that I usually would check out, which is easy to do thanks to YouTube and Spotify. But as far as like just going back and, I don't know, listening to some Zepp or something like that, I don't find that I have time to do that.
Yeah, I have had these same thoughts, and it feels kind of like dystopic or something. Like,
yeah, it's the kind of dystopia that it's like, really, are you going to complain about this? You have like hundreds of media channels where your grandparents just had like, one station they could tune in on their coat hanger antenna.
Fair, yeah, that's fair.
That's the kind of dystopia I can get behind.
The content dystopia.
The content dystopia. That's what we're in. The content wars.
Oh, boy.
Well, let's get into our featured subject for today's show. We've talked about a lot of Star Trek episodes, a lot of famous Star Trek episodes, but there's some that just stand out above the rest. Some that themselves have given rise to other forms of content or homages, and ones that they themselves may be drawing on something deeper, some idea, something mimetic that just is that's something that we go back to when we create fiction, be it in sci-fi or fantasy. And in this case, it is the episode of the original series called Arena, which is based in part on a short story by Fredrick Brown of the same name.
It's so weird that they have the same name. Do you think that was always the case?
That is a great question. I always love getting asked questions that I'm not ready to answer, but it's only fair, I suppose. I think that, like I mentioned before, it's just such a basic idea, the idea of single combat, mano y mano or alieno, as the case may be in this case. And I think that it's just, Arena is a great name for it, whether or not that was the original name of the script or what. What would you call it? You just call it Arena, right?
Right. No,
that's what's happening.
Yeah, I love it too. Like, I love the simplicity of the episode, and in the title even just fits that aesthetic so well.
Yeah, Fredrick Brown was the author of many, many short form stories, some even just a few pages. He also wrote some novels like the fabulous Clip Joint, Screaming Mimi, which became a 1958 movie starring Anita Ekberg, Martians Go Home, and Rogue in Space. Apparently, according to his wife, Fredrick Brown hated to write. And so he would do I'm right there with you, buddy. He'd do everything that he could to avoid it. He would take a walk, or he'd call up a friend and like play chess or something like that, or play with his cat. And if he had like a really long or really tough story to break, he would just get on a bus or just take a trip somewhere and just think about it a lot. And then finally he'd have to, probably because there's a deadline coming up, he would go home and then just bang it all out and just be done with it, which is often I feel like that when I try to create things.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's like the fun part for some people, myself included, is like where you're actually thinking of the concept and thinking how it's gonna go, but then when it's like doing the mechanical part almost is like can be kind of a slog.
I have a thing, I don't know where it comes from, where I am worried that I will prepare too early. You know what I mean? Like if I so I prepare a lot of scripts for broadcasting, for podcasting, and so I've never been done with a script like 2 weeks ahead of time, and then when record date comes up, I just pull up the script and go, okay, all right, I'm ready to go. It's always, there's something about, maybe it's just my history with like live performance and theater, that there's a freshness that I want to it. So I want it to be in my mind and have to have recently thought of it, because I'm definitely going to think about 10 other things if I put it down. And that, that gets me in trouble. Sometimes I'm preparing the night before, the minute before, and sometimes it's stressful, but at the same time, I can sort of understand how he feels. That sometimes it's just, when you're developing something, you're trying to think of ideas, you end up sort of kind of ripping and tearing at yourself. And sometimes it's easier to just kind of get it out and sort of edit as you go and create as you go, and I understand if that is his motivation.
Yeah, I've been mine. The preparation is one thing, but mine's more like for example, at Zelda Dungeon, we'll make like lists sometimes, like best whatever in Zelda, and it's fun to discuss that and make the rankings and discuss why. But then when it comes time, like, okay, now like let's come up with like a script or like write out, like actually explain it. Not via conversation, but, in a more formal way. It's like,
right.
Can't we just record the conversation or something? And just, which we've done, because it's like, okay, that's way more, that's the fun part, is like the discussion,
Yeah, and plus you're conversationalists, you're on-air personalities. You banged it out probably in a fun way just discussing it. So why do we have to sit down and clackety-clack and get it on paper?
Yeah. Yeah, we're not that profesh.
Oh, the preparation, though, you can always tell. It always makes it better. He wrote in sci-fi, fantasy, thrillers, horror. A lot of his works feature parodies of genres or like a twist. Some of his stories would have a twist that would involve something seeming fantastic actually being something mundane. He would sort of like blow up mundane situations, and they seemed weird. He has a novel called What Mad Universe, where a guy... he's like transported to an alternate universe where space travel and aliens are all just like normal stuff. So he's like walking around and like it's Earth, but it's like a jet set sci-fi age sort of Earth.
Okay.
And he has to sort of deal with that. So yeah, he was just a really creative and prolific guy, despite the long bus trips. And his short story Arena was published in June 1944 in Astounding Science Fiction magazine. And it was well loved. It was voted as one of the top 20 SF stories written before the establishment of the Nebula Awards by the Science Fiction Writers of America. Yeah, so this is kind of we didn't have the awards back then, but this would have got an award for the best short story of that year.
Okay, gotta recognize.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, it's got that quality to it that this type of story, in lit class or whatever, they talk about the 7 or 11 or however many types there are of conflict of man versus man, or man versus alien in this case. And it's just, I don't know if I'd call it a meme, but I would definitely describe it as mimetic. This idea of two people battling over something, over principles or over, for their nation. And you find it in things like the Trek episode. There's an Outer Limits episode called Fun and Games that's very similar to this idea. So much so that it doesn't feature a credit. They didn't, I guess, try to credit Fredrick Brown for this, but that was fine. The funny thing with the Trek episode is Gene Kuhn started writing the Trek episode like before they made this connection that it was really similar to Arena, and then like one of their researchers was like, Gene, this is a lot like a story from 20 years ago. And this happens, you know, when you're creating something, you're influenced by all kinds of things. I think they've called it cryptamnesia, where you're sort of creating something, but you're being influenced by something without, you know, recognizing it. And so they approached Fredrick Brown to say, hey, you know, we love the short story. Can we adapt this? And he said, yeah. And so they gave him a credit and they paid him. A little did he know, like, this was deep into production by the time they contacted him. I don't know what they would have done if he had said no.
Yeah, I wonder I always wondered, like, what changed, like, once they did find out. Like, did they say, like, you know, maybe we can, you know, lean into it a little bit more? You know, like, I wonder if the production changed at all. Maybe that's when they titled it Arena even, too, you know?
That's, yeah, possibly they had some other name for the script, you know, Cestus 3 or something. But the differences in the scripts or in the two different stories, I think are probably inherent to the Trek production. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the Trek episode.
Yeah, definitely.
It's also been adapted into a Marvel Comics story in their Worlds Unknown series. There is an episode of the British show Blake Seven, entitled Duel. That's a similar thing. You ever seen the? You ever read the novella Enemy Mine or seen the Louis Gossett Jr. movie based on the novella?
No.
That's kind of a similar thing with a twist. The Next Generation episode Darmok is very similar.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And even like there's a TNG episode called The Enemy. That's kind of more like Enemy Mine than like Arena, but if you just follow that mimetic thread back, it's you can see where the influences come from.
Yeah, I think it's something. I think maybe we talked about it during like Forbidden Planet, but like stuff. It feels now like stuff that is, I guess you said mimetic. You know, it feels like tropey, but it's like this feels like almost the origin point. But it's wild to like see it in. Like, so the pure form, I guess.
It's interesting to see what people make of that story. When you revisit that story, what do you do with it? And if it's in the 40s, it's two people or two beings competing, and one of them is just better than the other, or just deserves to win, I guess. And then as the story goes on, you know, to later eras and decades, more enlightened decades, you add a twist to it. I couldn't imagine like the new Twilight Zone or one of the last Outer Limits reboots just being like, and the human won because, you know, humans, cool.
Yeah, and being like, I didn't want to take credit for the genocide because no one would believe me.
Yeah,
you
right.
know, like, yeah, it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, well, let's dive into the story. The story focuses specifically around a guy named Bob Carson, who should have just been called Dirk White Guy. And he is a space pilot for the Human Empire or whatever it is. We're not given a lot of detail, as it is just a short 15, 16-page story about where we are. We know it's the future. We know that Earth has at least expanded into our own solar system and perhaps beyond. And we are in conflict with a race called the Outsiders. And the way the story describes it is we don't know a lot about them. Some of our colonies have been sort of attacked and sort of raided by them, but nobody's got a good look at them. And there's been some skirmishes in space, but now an outsider fleet is, you know, headed for our solar system, and the Earth fleet is out beyond the orbit of Pluto, ready to fight them. And this is it. This is going to be us or them. You know, one side's going to win, one side's going to lose, and that's going to decide the fate of this conflict here.
Big showdown.
Yeah, the big showdown. And our boy Carson is flying a scout ship, and he is one of the sort of lead ships, and he draws a bead on another scout ship that is coming his way. And as they are starting to engage in sort of a dogfight, suddenly a mysterious planet appears out of nowhere, and it shouldn't be there. He even remarks that they are within the orbit of Pluto, but Pluto at this point in time is on the opposite side of the sun, so there should be nothing out here. And he crashes on this planet, essentially, and wakes up and he's in a different kind of place.
Yeah, and I love then the story actually starts from there, and it like flashes back, and I love the way I love the establishment. It feels like the way they describe the world feels very, I don't know, artificial, I guess. Right? They're like basically in like a big blue dome.
Right.
It seems like.
Yeah.
And it's very unsettling, the description of this place.
Yes, it's like a habitat or something. He's never exactly sure if he is on a planet or if it is just some constructed space somewhere else. I like how they talk about the blue vegetation and the blue sand. And he's like, he's got blue sand on his white skin. So we know he's white. So we got that. It's important in the 40s. But he knows that it's not, that the sand itself is blue because his skin isn't blue. It's not like an effect of the light. And otherwise, otherwise it is, somewhat like Earth, a desert scene on Earth, but it's very hot. And he quickly realizes that he is not alone in this space. There is another something there. He sees a sort of red spherish object, and he's not exactly sure what it is. And suddenly he gets a message sort of in his mind saying basically that you're in another space and another time, and it's you versus this guy. We know that the humans are fighting these other beings, outsiders as you call them, and you're both capable of a lot of potential. We ourselves that are talking to you are this sort of uplifted single entity, eternal race that has risen from our base origins, and you are both capable of this, but not if you guys destroy each other. So basically we're going to decide it right here. If one of you kills the other, then that race is going to go on and the other one is done.
Yeah, so they don't care about necessarily care about enlightenment. They're just like, may the best race win.
Yeah, maybe they're like, we only want winners in our heaven society. Like when one of your races like reaches our level, we don't want you guys to be wimps. So we only want the tough guys up here. We never really get a sense of their motivations.
Yeah, which I kind of like. Again, with the simplicity, it's just like, okay, that makes sense. It's kind of messed up, but
yeah,
that's what's happening out here in space.
Yeah, out here in the Blue Dome. And Carson is told that time here basically runs differently. Like back in your universe, time stands still and won't go on until you guys work this out. And presumably is telling the outsider that as well. The outsider, we learn, is this red ball. It's this sort of spherical creature. The story does a good job of like giving you some idea of what it's like, but not letting you imagine it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like, while reading this, like, this would be cool to see as a comic book, because I felt like the imagery, even though it was like simplistic, it was very like stark, like this blue planet, this bright red roller, it was like, it was like kind of scary to picture in my mind, as opposed to, like more detail, I think wouldn't even really have changed it for me.
Yeah, there's the story was reprinted in the 1977 issue of Starlog magazine, and Boris Vallejo did some illustrations for that are really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
They make it seem kind of like lumpy almost, but then it's got sort of blobby tentacles and stuff like that coming out. But the gist is very different and very easy to probably dehumanize from a human's perspective.
Yes.
And the Carson learns immediately that the creature has some sort of telepathic ability, perhaps to make up for its lack of mouth or sense organs that we can tell. And it gets this feeling of just hate from it. Like right away it knows, okay, this thing does not like me. And you have to give him credit in that he realizes, okay, so we're supposed to fight to the death, but maybe there's a way out of this. And he makes a show of sort of putting down his rock or his weapon and being like, here it is. Like, let me think good vibes to you. Let's not do this. But he gets nothing really back in return.
Yeah, it's very much wants to establish like they have no interest in this. They're hostile, outsider, other. Yeah.
Yeah. I think at one point, and this is, I don't think that the story, I don't think that Fredrick Brown, no shade on him, was as concerned as Star Trek was in the 60s of seeing an other as, equal or on the same level as us. But he does wonder at one point if it even understands or has the same feelings as he does. You know what I mean? Is it
right?
Like, is it just a machine that just wants to consume and destroy? Which is how I think that a lot of American servicemen probably thought of the Axis powers in World War II about when this came out.
Yeah, like this was, regardless of like what I guess the intent is, this could serve for some as like sort of a effective like propaganda,
Yeah, I think so. And I like how immediately after that he's like, okay, so you don't want peace? Well then, it's to the death. And then he knows that like humans aren't really psychic or don't have psychic powers like this thing does, but he tries to like think it to death. So he immediately starts thinking like horrible, like murderous thoughts, and is trying to, push these ideas, into it because they're separated physically by this invisible barrier that seems to basically cut the dome in half. So they can't actually physically interact. So he's just there like, ooh, die. But that does not work.
Fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have the dome, and they establish like, okay, we're going to make it a fair fight, despite, well, I guess fair physically. So it's more about like who can outthink, almost this like situation, this puzzle that we put ahead of you.
Sure.
There's something, it was very like, it felt very video gamey actually. I was thinking about
okay, yeah.
Like you're put in this situation, he does some problem solving, like he runs the edge of the dome, they're throwing stuff through the portal or the barrier.
Because it seems like objects like sand and rocks, which is pretty much all they have, will go through, but they can't physically go through, which is a good leveler because, from a point of physiognomy, they're totally different. Like, could he punch it to death or could it smother him or whatever? Don't worry about that. They both are tool users, so it's their use of tools that's going to decide the victor.
Mm-hmm. I thought about the aliens like designing the level that they're on, like we'll put some talking lizards here and some little shrubs here.
I know, the talking lizards. We'll get to it. I have to imagine that, I'm trying to imagine like Star Trek characters in this situation. Like Picard would have just laid right down. That's pretty much what he does. That's pretty much what he does in Darmok, because when he's beamed down to the surface with Darmok, immediately he just like throws his knife down. He's like, okay, all right, friends, right?
Yeah, and the guy's he's shouting like,
no, pick up the knife. We have to stab the electric monster. And he's like, no, I don't want to.
You can encapsulate his whole thing where I think the guy says like, Shaka, and Picard's like, yeah, Shaka indeed.
Yeah, no Shaka today, not on my watch.
Yeah, that's classic Picard. I won't have any of this.
Right. So there are blue lizards that are there amongst the brush and rocks. The blob-like creature outsider picks one up and has these little pincer or little like tentacles and immediately like rips off some limbs of the lizard and then throws it at the guy, and it goes through the barrier. So the guy thinks, okay, so living creatures can't go through, dead ones can. I'll make a note of that. And then after that, it's sort of back and forth. Like he clocks the thing with a rock pretty good, so it sort of retreats. There's probably like I think they said like 200 or 250 like feet of space. So the thing sort of backpedals to its end of the dome, and they're both trying to figure out what to do. And as this goes on, and his leg is wounded because the thing threw a rock at him too. And as it goes on, it's very hot, it's very dry, and he begins to be overmatched physically. He begins to get really worn down by what's going on.
Mm. He's also naked. That's maybe worth
totally
pointing
naked.
out.
Yeah, no weapons, no nothing.
It's cool. He does, but he builds like some belt, like a utility belt or something.
Right? Yeah. I'd like to
him.
see Honor Limits take a shot at this, and I think with some clever Austin Powers camera work, you could do the naked thing.
Yeah.
But eventually, the he starts to wonder if he's hallucinating because he says hello to one of the lizards and the lizard says hello back to him. And it's just sort of tucked away at that point in the story. But he's like, okay, sure. Why not? Talking lizards. Okay.
Yes. Again, I thought this was good puzzle design too. So it's like they've got the lizards there and it's got this quirk that you think is just a quirk. He's, he talks to him and he's like, maybe I'm going crazy. And they're using it to, test the barrier, and then it ends up being like part of the solution, and it makes you feel smart for reading it.
Yeah,
in
a way that, and we never get any background on the alien force that's put them here, but we don't know if that was part of their design or not, like if that was something emergent, if that was what he was always supposed to figure out, or it was just the quality of humanity that helped him out of the situation.
Exactly. It's like in Breath of the Wild when you solve a puzzle and you're like, I don't know if I was supposed to do that.
Yeah. I just dropped a rock on the whole thing and crushed it. Yeah. The Outsider is apparently very good with tools because it builds like an entire catapult.
Yeah.
Now it's like shooting giant rocks at him.
I love that it's like, it's not really that big of a deal, but it's like, I can't go to sleep.
Yeah, right. He's afraid to go to sleep because he'll get his head splattered. Yeah. So he uses his own ingenuity and builds some fire bombs because he realizes that some of the rocks are flint-like, which is a little bit of science knowledge like we see in the Star Trek episode, and builds some fire bombs, burns the catapult. And at this point, he's really beat. He's kind of passing in and out of consciousness. His leg is really infected. And eventually that lizard shows up again and says, kill, hurt, come, kill, hurt, come. And he's like, okay, I don't understand what this is. But he follows the lizard to the other lizard that we saw before who had its legs pulled off. And it turns out that lizard is not fully dead. It was just presumably in pain and unconscious when it went through the barrier. So now we have the added twist that the barrier is only a barrier to conscious life forms. Unconscious ones could presumably go through. So he mercy kills the lizard, and he figures out
That's nice.
Yeah, well, it's the right thing to do. And he finds out, he sets up this elaborate thing. So earlier in the story, he had dug down below ground to see how deep this barrier went down. And in doing so, he created like this berm, this sort of pile of sand. So he gets this spear that he's made and this knife, and he sits up on the berm with his back against the barrier, and then he knocks himself out with a rock, which is, that's a pretty desperate gambit. And when he gets knocked down, he's unconscious, he passes through the barrier and then wakes up on the other side and is able to kill the Outsider.
Yeah, and he didn't get killed when he was unconscious, though. That was very fortunate, I guess.
Yeah, because the Outsider was sort of creeping up, not sure exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
And there's a part where if you think that this story is trying to communicate something about, respecting things you don't understand and the oneness of all beings, I don't think it is. Because while he is laying there, he is trying to quiet his thoughts because, of course, the creature would be able to sense his thoughts, whether he's alive or dead. And in doing so, he has made himself kind of open to all the thoughts that the creature has. And it's not good. He basically, it says in the story that the creature's mind reminds him of the mind of a spider or the mind of a praying mantis or a Martian sand serpent raised to intelligence and put in telepathic rapport with human minds would be a wholly familiar thing. Compared to this, basically that like this thing is not alive. It's not a human. Man or roller, the universe was not a place that could hold them both.
Yeah, I was thinking of like Starship Troopers when this was happening.
Yeah, they know fear. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So kind of messed up, and he tears into that thing too.
Oh yeah,
it's like
it's dead.
Man.
It's dead. And then he wakes back up on his ship, and everything's fine. His commander calls in and says, I don't know, we just shot at them and they all blew up. They're all dead. So good job, everybody.
And he's like, looks at the camera, smirks, like, freeze frame.
Big wink. Yeah.
What can you do?
Did you like the story?
I loved it, actually.
Yeah, I actually liked it too.
how yeah, that it's very, in a way, I mean, even the things that are messed up about it is like it to me, the imagery and like the situation is so disturbing, and then like the outcome is disturbing. So it was an upsetting read, but I loved it at the same time. There was something pro wrestling about it too.
Oh.
Maybe that's just where my mind is, video games and pro wrestling. But it's just, simple setup.
Sure.
Just give us a good reason to watch these two go toe to toe. You wrecked my car. I'm going to have a death match against you.
The catapult is somebody coming in with the steel chair, and
exactly.
My God.
Yeah, there's all these twists and turns and near falls, and
yeah.
a clever. You want a good clever finish.
The cerebral assassin.
Exactly.
I wonder if it was. You talk about how it was kind of unsettling. I wonder if it was how much it was meant to be unsettling. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was for a reader at the time just to be like, and there you go. Yep. White humans are the smartest and they're always going to figure it out. And yet we look at it and we think of like, okay, so it seems like the rollers had, nefarious intent, but boy, that guy really tears into that thing at the end. And then they're all dead. Like they come from another galaxy. They're this spacefaring race. Apparently they're all dead now, or at least their entire military force is dead. And so how excited should we be about that?
Yeah, they create the story creates a situation where a genocide is like a just
genocide in effect. Yeah.
And where you can kind of, like raise your hand and go like, well, they had no choice. Not only was it just, but like they would have gotten genocide, because that's usually how it goes in real life. Us
or them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely at the time, like I said, it's probably meant to be more of a feel-good piece, I think.
I would guess so, yeah. Of course, it was printed in 1944. Like, this is before the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan. Another situation where you've got an ultimate victory and an ultimate defeat and a genocide, and all you can do is just go, it would have been a lot worse if we hadn't done this. A lot of justified violence for a supposedly noble cause.
Yeah. Yeah. So, reading it, I actually didn't know it was that old. I thought it was almost not specifically a response to that, but, kind of one of these like pieces of media that are trying to like not justify, but like sort out thoughts about that sort of thing, like almost a response to that sort of era, but I guess it's during that time still, so
yeah,
just trying to make sense of what's going on in the world a little bit.
And certainly Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't the first justified genocides, in the history of human conflict.
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar with Fredrick Brown. I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but I really found myself enjoying his prose style. It was different than what you'd think of. I know that like a lot of science fiction writers, and just genre writers in general, like introduced new prose styles, push forward different ways of telling stories and different voices. But it had kind of broken up, almost jazzy kind of feel sometimes, not complete sentences and just sort of fragments and thought ideas. You're just dealing with a guy who's totally inside of his head and trying to figure this out. He's not really talking to anybody. It was very different than a Heinlein thing like what we read the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, it might have to do with it being a short story too, but I like that it can sort of just focus on the situation. It's like we don't have to have a whole chapter that's explaining how his ship works, like
yeah, right.
Which is cool too in sci-fi, but like there's something I really like Ray Bradbury short stories for that reason too.
Oh yeah.
It's like you're almost picturing. It's like we're talking about like farmers on Mars. It's like very simple, and it's there's something you can connect to because it's for me it's more relatable, I guess.
Yeah. Whereas like Asimov, and I love Asimov, but it would be like,
yes, yeah.
Well, he took a draw on his pipe. I don't know about these alien guys. I really like the sequence at the beginning when he's having like the dogfight thing and he's talking about how he's got 3 seconds to do this. And then he's sort of counting down the seconds. He's saying 1, 2, 3, to himself, and he doesn't even realize it because he's just so focused on like getting this laser targeting thing on the guy. And yeah, I found myself reading it and like thinking it's just like a 15-page short story, but like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's like constantly. It's a page turner, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see, because I feel like there's just the right amount of stuff going on here that you could make a really interesting adaptation, like a film adaptation of this.
Yeah, I'd like to see something like that. And I don't know, if you hang around long enough on Disney Plus or Apple Plus, you'll probably see one.
Yeah, I would hope for one that's maybe a little bit more indie, or like maybe not one that went through like the studio, the Disney studio, but
if I was independently wealthy, and who's to say that I'm not, but not like Bill Gates level, but like just enough to spend on extra stuff, I would love to make like short adaptations of stories like this. Like there's an adaptation of one of my favorite Lovecraft stories that's coming out in movie form soon, called The Color Out of Space. It's going to star Nick Cage.
Yes. That looks awesome.
Yeah, that's always been one of my favorite short stories. And I'm sure they're going to do a good job, but you have to blow it up. You have to find subplots and make it like 2 hours. And just making like short, like 20-minute, well acted. I know a lot of good actors, good effects, and just creepy, or like a cool, short story, sci-fi thing. Like, yeah, I'd love to run a small indie studio that did stuff like that.
Just like a nice simple hook. Like this is like a totally different sort of movie, but like, if someone was like, what's The Lighthouse about? And it's like, well, it's about a lot of things, but like it's about two guys like taking care of a lighthouse, and then there's a lot of weird stuff in there.
Yeah, right.
But how much simple idea.
How much do you think the lighthouse cost?
Well, I guess they had to rent the lighthouse.
Actually, I think they pretty much built the lighthouse for that movie.
Yeah, that's probably that was probably a good budget they had there, or like a simple budget.
Okay, I just looked it up. $4 million.
Okay,
that's pretty good. That means that both of those guys must have been working scale. Because you think Willem Dafoe alone would get doubled, he'd get twice as much for a movie. Well, so
yeah, they but they seem like committed to to making some good stuff.
Oh, so. Those good actors I know. I'm not going to pay them. That's not. You got this all wrong.
Same thing with this story though. It's like you got one set, So I feel like there's it's not going to cost you guys a lot. Whoever A24, you can make this, right?
Right. All right, well, I'm inspired now. GoFundMe, Just Enough Trope Visual Studios, coming soon. That's pretty much it for the story. Anything else you want to say about it?
No, I mean, I think we covered it all.
I think so.
Yeah.
Short story, short discussion.
Story, and short, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back in just a little bit after a word from our sponsors with more BackTrekking.
Welcome to Virtual Theater. I'm Andy Spiteri.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
The day bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
If you're a gamer, a movie buff, or both, you're going to want to check out our podcast on video game movies and the stories that shape them.
Luigi, it's a mushroom. Come on.
Trust the fungus.
We let you decide which movies we cover via Twitter poll. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at VirtualTheaterX.
Right, you can hear him talking.
They can't understand me, kid.
And give us 2 thumbs up by subscribing on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The fate of billions will depend upon you. Sorry.
We are a part of the Just Enough Trope Network.
Okay, we're back, and it's time to talk about the Trek side of this equation. And what do you even say about Arena?
Captain's log, stardate 3045.6. The Enterprise has responded to a call from Cestus 3. On landing, we have discovered that the outpost has been destroyed.
How can you explain a massacre like that?
You must make certain that the alien vessel never reaches its home base.
I intend to. Firing phases, Captain.
I cannot.
We destroyed invaders, as I shall destroy you.
Iconic.
Yeah, it's one of the most famous episodes, most well-known episodes of Star Trek. I think I talked about Arena on Enterprising Individuals a long time ago, and I think the consensus that we came to was when most people think about Star Trek, they're thinking about Arena or something like it.
Yeah, I was thinking. I had a similar thought this week too, where I was it was like if you had to like just like picture in your mind the original series, it's like, you know, even if you didn't know that much about it, you'd be like Kirk on some planet engaged in physical combat with some alien.
Double axe handling a lizard monster, yeah.
Oh, yes. who is swinging, some really slow punches at him.
Yeah, right, yeah. That Gorn was played by 4 different people, one of whom, Bobby Clark was one of the stunt guys, and he reprised that role in a 2013 commercial. I don't know if you saw this commercial for the Star Trek video game, where William Shatner is playing the Star Trek video game on Xbox with a Gorn on a couch.
Oh, not again.
I remember this now.
Yeah.
That's good, because the Gorn were big in that game too, right?
Right, yeah. And that only works because of how iconic it is. It's 50 years later, and like you see this commercial and immediately like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, literally every aspect of this episode is iconic too. It's like it's hard for it to not be, because you got Shatner doing his thing,
right?
He's down on the planet. The Gorn looks amazing, and then just the setup and like what's going on and the ending at the end. It's all like every aspect is something that you like go to Star Trek and you hope you get, basically.
Yeah, and there's a lot of firsts in this episode, too. A lot of things are established, because this is early. This is only about halfway through the first season. And so this is the first time that the Federation is mentioned in the series.
Oh,
yeah, up to this point. And, all these things were developed before the show aired. As the show was airing, they were coming up with stuff. But at this point, like, we just thought, oh, it's a ship from Earth, right? So this is the first time that the Federation is really mentioned. It's the first time that photon torpedoes are used. It's the first time that the ship is established to have aft phasers. Yeah, it's the first time that William Shatner went deaf from an accident on set.
Oh, wait, which accident? What caused this?
I believe it's at the beginning of the episode when they're on Cestus 3 and all the explosions are going off. They're being shelled or whatever by the Gorn. And if you look close, in a couple of these scenes, in a lot of these scenes, this is before HDTV. So if you see a guy rolling around on his back, it's probably not Kirk, or Shatner, it's his stunt double. But in a lot of these scenes, like when Kirk is running to the trenches, when Spock comes out and runs to the trenches, those are the actors. And there are these pots going off next to them, exploding. And I don't know if it's the take they used, but in one of them, the thing went off and it was really close to Shatner's head, and he has, permanent tinnitus in one ear because of it. Yeah.
Oh, permanent. Dang.
But there is that one shot where he is kind of like snaking, he's serpentining, out to the trench, and then the thing goes off and he kind of rolls over like one whole time, and then he kind of gets back up on his legs, but then his legs go out and he kind of goes and falls back down.
Oh, well, incredible physicality.
Oh no, still. He was. Yeah, he was a great physical performer.
I do find a lot of times like the combat in all Star Trek series, not just going to poke fun at Shatner, is a little funny, but it's also exciting at the same time.
Yeah, for that was the height. That was a Jet Li movie back then.
Oh, sure, yeah. I can imagine.
The set there on Cestus 3 is significant because it appeared in the Wild Wild West, Bonanza, and other shows at that time. And it was placed rather near the Vasquez Rocks, which is, of course, the famous rocky arena that the Gorn and Kirk fight on, which has been seen in a million other things. It's in Blazing Saddles and Dante's Peak and F Troop and MacGyver. And now, like when you show that, you're doing a thing. Like you are trying to specifically reference that. Like in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, when the robots kill them, it's done at the Vasquez Rocks.
Right. I've always wanted to go there. There was a day actually I was in the area and I was like, okay, that's what we're gonna do today, and it didn't work out, which is kind of upsetting.
Oh no.
But maybe one day. That's like a destination. I feel like.
Oh sure, for a lot of people.
That must have. Yeah, I need to do that.
I think it appears. I think that they actually shot there. Maybe they just sort of comped it in, but I know that it appears in the upcoming Picard show.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, I mean, it's just a otherworldly place. Like a lot of that part of the country it has like, it's like a place in the country you can go, and it's like there is just no one around. It looks nuts.
Yeah, and of course it was used in many other Star Trek episodes because it was a good place to shoot. Yeah,
it shows up everywhere. Like, there's that episode of Futurama that did this, obviously, and even then, it's like they're trying to, animate this location. So
yeah, right,
yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many elements in this that are prime Trek, from the rubber aliens to the judo chops. You get dead red shirts, godlike aliens. You have a situation where. And I feel like that maybe this is the first one, but we get other examples of this where Kirk is doing something and then the bridge crew is like watching him and Spock is like, if he can do this, then he'll have it. Like he's narrating what he's doing.
Yeah, it's a little cheesy. It's a little like they're the audience, but it works.
Yeah, they're watching Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. It gives them something to do too while, it's not just a Kirk episode, even though it is.
Right. And I think what works about this episode, or what makes it good, is the fact that it's like terribly paced. They go to this Alamo fort, and then there's a great set piece there with the explosions and stuff. And then they get on the ship, and then they just stay on the ship for a long time. And the whole second act is just padding of like, we're going to go to warp 6, warp 7, warp 8. Ooh, no. And it should be boring, but it's not. It kind of works. And then it isn't until about halfway through that we actually get to the arena.
Yeah, it's weird. Like last time I watched this episode was only in July, but like I always forget about everything beforehand. And I'm not even trying to take anything away from it, because it like we said, it does everything, and it is kind of cool. It is kind of cool that it's like, okay, skirmish, and then you get a space battle,
right?
But like
there's a lot of padding.
Yeah, I think the Goran just overpowers everything else because it's so cool.
Yeah, that's what you remember from it. I do like too that they go down to the planet. Oh, before they go to the planet, there's this exchange that opens the episode where they're talking about the great table that the Commodore keeps or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Are they talking about drugs? I'm not a drug guy. I don't know. I think they're like, he keeps a good table. Oh, he sure does. Oh, command has its privileges. They can't just be talking about like a turkey dinner. Like what? Oh, is it girls or something? Is there something that I don't understand?
I was just thinking like, oh, this is just this is something you would understand if you're either from the 60s or like you
right.
had more money or something.
These guys are real excited about a home cooked meal.
Yeah, I thought I was just like not fancy enough to understand this. Like maybe I had to be a
more fancy man.
We have to be boomers to understand this.
Okay, boomer, sure. All right.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and then I like how Spock is like, well, you're a sensualist, Dr. McCoy. He's like, you bet your pointy ears I am.
Yeah, we had some great...
It's drugs.
Yeah, that... If it's something that Bones is down with, maybe it is.
The table is... Oh, it's booze. That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like they're doing this Beavis and Butthead routine. Like, I just didn't understand. But they go down to the planet,
and they're watching, like Beavis and Butthead. They're watching the TV with us, like they watch the music videos.
That's exactly what it is. They go down there, and we don't see the Gorn at all, which is probably good. I think the reveal of the Gorn halfway through is perfect, but
it's amazing.
Yeah, and they lose a couple guys, and then Kirk has to use the Tide Pod launcher to get rid of them.
I love that prop is amazing.
Yeah, that's a great prop. But you get right away what it is. It looks weird and like space, but you're like, okay, he's gonna shoot like a thing over there.
It feels like maybe it's because it's still like you're talking about like things are still being like developed for Star Trek. You know, the world doesn't just come fully formed. But I was like, this feels like something that shouldn't exist in Star Trek, like a
do they have
grenade launcher?
Yeah.
Can it be like a phaser photon bomb thing? I don't know.
Right. I like how, and no offense to Fredrick Brown, like he's just writing a shorter story here, but Gene Kuhn did a great job, I think, of expanding the story and making it consistent with the values of our characters, but also giving us the right beats. So immediately they jump in the Enterprise and chase after these guys, and Spock is like, well, how far are we going to take this? And Kirk is like, they blew up this Cestus 3. You know, he doesn't say revenge because we're above revenge, but he basically wants revenge for this. So we send Kirk into this situation where he gets a chance to kill this guy and get revenge. And so we're wondering, you know, what will he do? And of course, at the end, when he does the right thing, because of course he does, it feels like a stronger choice. You know, when he finally says, I won't kill him. Get your entertainment somewhere else. Like, it's,
right.
We see the turnaround. We see the lesson that he's learned.
Right. It's like, it almost feels like the story, you know, the story they're adapting. For some of the other stuff we've talked about too, was almost like the antithesis of like the message of Star Trek, but it's like, you know, expertly adapted to like fit into that world.
Yeah, and they're on brand. Like the idea that even the changes of, okay, so the Gorn are weird, they're a little vicious, and they're ugly to us, but we invaded their space, you know, accidentally. Like they were defending themselves. That makes, and Kirk doesn't necessarily even know that or understand that when he decides to spare him. He spares him because it's the right thing to do. It's Federation ideals. And then we figure out, oh, okay, so we actually were on their turf and we might have made a mistake there too. So we avoided this huge incident and we did it just by being compassionate.
And the Gorn, it is very other and it's very evil or whatever, and maybe it's just part of the old school charm now, but it's charismatic, you know what I mean? It's a likable creature, I feel like,
yeah.
As scary as it is.
Tough too. He Kirk Wile E. Coyote's the guy and he gets right back up.
Yeah, he like, it's like, okay, he throws punches that seem so slow that it's not making
I have to imagine that the actor couldn't see shit though, right? He just didn't want to clock the star of the show.
But I like to imagine it's so strong that even this really slow punch would like just break him in half. Yeah. One thing that stuck out to me, I was talking about like the level design of the short story, but like I felt that in this too, just because it's like they're out in this location that they're filming on, right. And then they just have the like minerals laid about there, but it's got to be very like, it's very colorful and obvious. It doesn't feel natural, you know. It feels like in a video, like an MMO, when you're like, I need to mine some copper ore, and it's like, right. Oh, there's that bright brown.
This flower
rock.
Is sparkling. Yeah, I can pick it up.
Yeah. I loved it though. It was so good.
And of course, as he's assembling, I mean, it's a nice little science lesson for kids, I guess. But as he's assembling his cannon, they also use that to just pad the whole thing out. So it's just scenes of Kirk running around the Vasquez rocks, and then Spock's like, "Yes, sulfur. Now he's got sulfur."
Yeah, they really couldn't think of, or I don't know if couldn't is the right word, but they really didn't think of like a thing that could have been a whole episode about this, like kind of like how like Darmok is, you know. It's like the whole episode is the situation, whereas this is, well, we only got enough time to fill like 15 minutes. So
if they did, well, there's no contact between the Enterprise and the Gorn ship in space. They've got that in Darmok. I think if this was written again today, they would exploit a little more the fact that they can communicate, because they've got these recording and also translating devices. And at one point, the Gorn does say, "Look, give it up. You're going to die. I'm going to kill you." But instead, I think if it was rewritten today, it would be more of a Die Hard scenario where Kirk is trying to assemble this thing, but he's also, trying to have bravado over the walkie-talkies, while the Gorn is like, also maybe saying, "Oh, let's have some peace," but he's like sharpening a knife at the same time.
Yeah, that'd be cool, and they would probably start, in media res or whatever, like
right,
like skip all the grenade launcher and how many warps do we do,
And Kirk would lose his shoes somehow. How does Kirk know how to build a cannon? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. There's just always stuff in Star Trek where it's like they know a lot of stuff, and I just think, well, like, they got like 6-year-olds doing calculus, so they're just like they just know. They're all know-it-alls, That's how I feel.
He is kind of a gun nut, though, isn't he? Like in the movies, we see his apartment, and he's got a lot of flintlocks and like ancient weapons. So maybe he's into like projectile weapons and cannons and stuff like that.
I guess they don't really explore that too much, though.
He knows his basic chemistry.
He can ride a horse.
Yeah, he loves horses, loves guns.
Yeah, he's like a lot of Star Trek characters who want to live, 400 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it? I mean, I guess it's the easiest thing to get across to people who live in that time. You're like, oh, I like Dr. Pepper too. Tom Paris is my hero.
They should make a character who's like completely nostalgic for like 2089 or something, and just makes a bunch of pop culture references constantly, and is into like holo surfing or whatever,
holo surfing,
some future sport.
My holographic, future skateboard. And I love Haley Joel Osment III's acting. He's really great. Yeah.
I like Halo 30. That's
right.
My favorite series.
Anyway, I do really like the Trekkening of this story. I think it's a real nice example of what a Trek story would look like. The Metrons, which I don't think have ever come back on screen. They always said that they would check in with us. Maybe we're not civilized enough yet, but that's an interesting thing. It's another situation where you've got an actress playing the actor, the physical body, but then of course Vic Perrin, famous voice of The Outer Limits, and other Star Trek roles, is the voice too. And they're really kind of condescending. They're like, "No, you're not so bad." Kirk's like, "Okay."
Yeah, classic. It's like the Q, the whoever,
Yeah,
like
right.
the prophets, where it's like, you're too simple. Like maybe some other time.
Yeah, we're dum-dums. Got it. Thanks for not obliterating us.
Maybe in a few thousand years or something. I think they say that's like the final line with Spock.
And then they drop them 500 parsecs away. And I know that that's like a cool thing to say, but a parsec is what, 3.26 light years? So that puts them like almost 2,000 light years away from where they were initially. And then at the end, he's like, well, go warp one. Warp one, that'll take you 2,000 years to get back to where you were initially.
This
is like a Voyager level displacement.
I had no idea how far that was actually supposed to be, but I was like, they're acting pretty casual about it. Yeah. And they're like, okay, yeah, no big deal, warp one. And I was like, oh, okay, something's not right here, but okay.
Yeah.
They eventually got back by the next episode.
Yeah, of course they did, yeah. I mean, the next episode might have been set before this episode, the way the stardates kind of work. So
yeah.
Well, let's talk about technology in this episode. It plays an important role, even primitive technology. And Trek is Trek because of the technology of the future. So we'll do a technological exchange between this short story and this episode of Star Trek. And the technology that we're concerned with are of 10 different categories. That is phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drives, replicators, communicators, shields, medical technology, and androids. We will add one to the story, take one away from Trek. Let's roll the D10. And the result that I got was 9, which is advanced medical technology.
Oh, okay. Well,
added that to Arena, what would we get?
Well, yeah, I think anything would definitely help get a leg up in this because.
And I guess in the
naked.
Yeah, I guess in the conceit of Arena, we'll say that I know that they're stripped down and have nothing, but they've got this. They've got advanced medical technology.
Mm-hmm. What? He could have saved that lizard instead of mercy kill it. Let's start with that.
The lizard is got a little lizard bio bed and beep beep. You're gonna make it.
Kill hurts.
No,
just hold on.
Health insurance.
Keep talking to me. Keep talking to me.
It's not your time.
I think though, if you could add in maybe the Trek twist there, like he kills the guy, but then he brings him back. Kills the roller, brings him back.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Maybe I feel like that's
It's like an Amok Time situation where you kill the person to satisfy what the duel is, but then you can just bring them back and everything's cool.
Yeah, like maybe part of me hopes that our protagonist, I forgot his name, Carson.
Yes.
He started off not wanting to kill, or maybe that was just a ruse, or maybe he didn't really believe that.
I think that is like the concession to, speak softly and carry a big stick. We're good people, but don't piss us off.
Right, exactly. But maybe if he had the chance, he could trick him.
Yeah, his human frailty is at the center of it too. We never get the impression that the roller is debilitated by the environment. He mentions, well, maybe this guy's maybe his planet is 300 degrees, so maybe he's freezing, but we never really see that. So his leg wound, the thirst that he feels, the heat, all things that could probably be taken care of with a medical tricorder or a medical kit.
Yeah, it did. I did constantly not question, but I was constantly thinking about the concept of fairness, and how you could actually ensure fairness, in a fight. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Because they say, oh, we'll make it just as uncomfortable for him, but it's certainly in some way, we've made it a mental challenge now. It's that's not fair either,
right.
Well, whatever. But that, when they're talking about how scratched up he is and all this stuff, and that thought came to mind quite a bit.
And it's not like when he goes through the barrier and he's on the roller's side, it's hotter or colder or the air is different or anything. Apparently this was because a human would find 72 degrees bearable or optimal, and he says that he estimates that it's almost 130 degrees. So maybe the creature does live in 250, 300 degrees environment, and it is freezing, and he's really hot. Maybe that's their balance there. They're fairly similar, but they've sort of set this: you're going to be uncomfortable, but figure it out.
Yeah.
I still like the idea.
What a coincidence, though.
Well, yeah, it's just so perfect. There's beings from a totally different galaxy. I love the idea of the little lizard, though, with the little lizard crutch. And thank you.
Yeah, I think, maybe they wouldn't even have gotten in this situation. But who knows? We don't know what their tech is like.
He wouldn't have had the scars at the end, which are, I guess, his proof that it did actually happen to him. You could just knit those away with a flesh knitter.
But then he's got nothing,
Did it happen at all?
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone. Hashtag Twilight Zone. Let's remove then advanced medical technology from the episode arena. What happens then?
Well, sure. If it just disappeared then, because that, I feel like the whole history of Starfleet might be in jeopardy there. But I mean,
Bones wouldn't be there to snicker about the table that Commodore Traeger keeps.
Right, and there is some lines in there of we've been talking a lot lately together about the dynamic between the Vulcan and human characters, and we need Bones there, and we need Spock there.
Spock might not be there because if Vulcan human hybrids need a little extra help, medically, to survive,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, there might not be a Spock.
So we'd lose two of our crucial characters here. So
that guy in the beginning would definitely be dead.
Yeah.
Bones says he'll be dead in half an hour if we can't get him to the ship, which is great bedside manner. But also, that guy would just be straight out dead.
We don't fully know, do we, what happens to the Gorn guy either?
No, we never find out.
But I think we presume that I'm not gonna kill you, and then it's like, okay, you're okay, but like
while he's talking to Vic Perrin, the guy just bleeds out in the sand.
yeah, but I meant, yeah, he would just be totally screwed for sure.
He's got diamonds embedded in his body,
Oh,
just like that Bond movie.
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Die another Gorn.
That's the ambitious crossover I want to see.
Oh, it's probably happened. What else? I suppose, I mean, Kirk is, well, he sprains his leg or something like that, but it doesn't really factor in.
Yeah, I mean, he has a bum leg for the rest of his career.
For his career?
Yeah, like that, you know, he has some career-ending injury.
Right. So, yeah, he's got to have a captain's cane or something for the rest of his service.
Sure, yeah.
You'd have to
really
lower that captain's chair so he doesn't have to climb up on the thing.
Honestly, I think other than, like, well, not to take away the human lives in this episode, but, like, I feel like the biggest, like, butterfly effect thing this would have is that those talking lizards could have survived.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, even though they weren't real, I think, but...
So you are coming down 100% on they are NPCs in this game.
I think so, unless it's a taste of, like, maybe... I did kind of wonder, like, what do these people's, like, home world or whatever they live on look like? Like, why did they think blue? You know, like, it's a little thought provoking. It's kind of cool you don't find out, but I did think, like, what is their concept of lizards?
Right, right.
Do they look like lizards to him? And, like, what does the roller think about lizards? You know?
Well, like, what was the roller's option then to win? Because if the lizards are the key to the humans' way to win, which is weird when you think about it, it's like self-destructive. Like the aliens, like, if you're willing to bash yourself in the head with a rock, then you deserve to win, and the lizards will get you there. Like, what was the roller's option? Presumably it can't knock itself out, even if it could communicate telepathically with the lizards. Was there a cheat code that it could learn from those lizards to do its own thing?
Maybe it's like if it's a video game, you know, it's got its own perk that would allow it, give it a path to victory. You know?
Maybe it could use its psychic powers to sort of to negate like its own thoughts, you know, to like block its thoughts so it seems like it's unconscious and then pass through the thing.
That's what the modern remake of this is from the roller's perspective.
Yeah, and it'd be all gamified too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've satisfied our technological exchange there.
Absolutely.
Every week it gets weirder and weirder, but we did it. Should we tell people what's coming up on next week's BackTrekking?
Okay, so next week we are finally getting back to the classic TNG ep, The Defector.
Yeah.
And, you know, it relates to Henry V, but we are going to be watching Netflix's The King.
Yeah, the new movie about Henry V.
Yeah, so I'm
starring
your
boy Robert Pattinson. Well,
Pattinson. Yeah, it's got quite the cast actually, so it should be cool.
Yeah, and definitely better than just I don't know, reading the Wikipedia page for Henry V.
Yeah, it gives us something to.
Well, that is it for us for this week's BackTrekking. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, tell a friend and follow us at BackTrekking on Twitter. You can tell us also on Twitter what you think we should look at in future episodes, because we're always looking for new ideas of things to cover. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter at GUIFame. I got all kinds of podcasts there. Virtual Theater at Virtual Theater X.
Yeah.
We just had kind of a loosey-goosey episode come out where we talked about what we would want to see from a Luigi's Mansion movie.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, we mostly just wanted to, you know, do one of those fantasy casting, you know, oh, John Leguizamo, get him back in there, you know, type of
fighting ghosts.
Yeah, so it's a fun episode though, so go check that out.
Awesome. Check that out. I'm at Caliban, K-A-1-I-B-A-N on Twitter, and I'll also point you to one of the newest shows on our network, Sailor Noob. You can find that at twitter.com/noob_sailor. We look at Sailor Moon and all the cultural elements and fun anime stuff on there. And that is it for us. We'll see you soon, and until then, keep on trekking.